Okay, let's see. Mississippi, Minnesota. Here it is, Michigan. Let's see. There's Detroit, Farmington Hills. Oh wait, that's not. Oh, this is Upper Peninsula. Okay, hang on, just a second. Just a second. Okay, here we are. There's the mitten. There we go. Let's see now. How do I get? Okay, there's Brighton. So if I want to go, you remember this? Do you remember these things? I remember Melanie would be driving with me somewhere, and I would say, honey, where are we supposed to turn? And she'd be looking at the map, and she goes, I have no idea. I don't know how to read a map. And we got in some colossal disputes over looking at things on a map. But this used to be the only way we could get around. You remember that? You remember? I am so glad we have these things now. I mean, these things, I can just put the map right in there. Where do I need to go? Type it in, and it tells me. It will even tell me where to go. Greatest invention ever. The best marriage invention ever was the GPS. But you know what? People didn't always have GPS. And yes, it can tell us where to drive, but it doesn't always tell us what to do in life, right? It doesn't always tell us what turns to take relationally. It doesn't always tell us how to grow our faith. It doesn't always tell us, it doesn't tell us any of those things. It can only tell us where to turn. Well, I was thinking about this week, and I was thinking about the story that comes right at the beginning of Genesis chapter 12, and it tells the story of Abraham when Abraham was invited to go. And God didn't give him a whole bunch of directions, but basically this is what God told him. Now the Lord God said to Abraham, go from your country and your kindred to your father's house to the land that I will show you. I will make of you a great nation, and I will bless you and make your name great, so that you will be a blessing. I will bless those who bless you, and the one who curses you I will curse, and in all your family, and in you all the families of the earth shall be blessed. So Abraham went. It's a great story, and it's a story of Abraham going and doing, and Sarah with him, going and doing what God has called them to do. And they go to that land that God has called them to. But here's the thing. They didn't have a GPS. And so even though they did and they went as God had told them to go, it wasn't always clear which turns to take. They knew what their final destination was. It was where God had promised them. But how to get there, what turns to take, where to go, they didn't necessarily know that. In fact, I love the way the book of Hebrews puts it, because the book of Hebrews in chapter 11, where it talks about the meaning of faith and it gives examples of people who live by faith, this is what it says about Abraham. By faith, Abraham obeyed when he was called to set out to a place that he was to receive as an inheritance. And he set out, here's the best part, not knowing where he was going. I just love that line. He went out not knowing where he was going. I mean, he knew where he was going, right? I mean, he was going to the land that God had promised him, but he didn't know where he was going. He just knew that wherever he went, there's going to be a promise at the end of this. That's how Abraham lived, and sometimes that's how we have to live. That's the way our church is trying to live right now. In the midst of this stewardship campaign, we know, we believe what God has given us as the promise. God wants us to begin to expand our ministry, to reach out in more significant ways with our mission ministry. And God is calling us to expand our online presence. God is calling us to make sure that our families are having their needs met. It's calling us to expand our ministries. But you know what? We don't always know what turns God's going to have us take along the way. And that's the challenge. That's the challenge we're in right now. Following God, getting up and going, but not always knowing every twist and turn along the way. We have to walk by faith, not by sight. And you know what? Sometimes it doesn't just affect the church that way. Sometimes we have to do that as individuals too. I mean, sometimes we may know in our heads what God is calling us to do in the big picture, but sometimes the day-to-day things feel as if they're not quite fitting into that big picture the way we need them to. And so walking by faith and not by sight, going even though we don't always know exactly what we're supposed to do the next day, when we live that way, we live like Abraham and Sarah did. And that's described in the book of Hebrew as faith. We walk by faith, not by sight. I love that example of Abraham. If only we could have that kind of faith.